What's up, Internet? We're back, and we have a VIP at the game today, so session's canceled because we're just gonna blab at them instead. Welcome back. I'm here. Isaiah is here.
I am here.
And then also we have Emanuele. You should say hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, indeed. And thank you for agreeing to come on for no particular reason other than I assume you just felt like it.
Well, you gave me the ability to once again ruin your session schedule, so I decided why not. Right?
That's true.
That's true.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, you're on point. I mean, we're so good at doing it ourselves. So for those who are hearing the mysterious third voice, yes, we have a guest on here, and the lead designer / only designer for Fabula Ultima. Do you have?
Okay, so yeah.
Explain that breakdown.
Yeah. So let's do the entire breakdown. So
yeah, go for it.
I am Emanuele Galleto, but for the sake of simplicity, I just go by Emma online, and I use he she they pronouns, and I am basically going to be 33 this year, which is a tragedy. And I am the creative director for Fabula Ultima. So this basically means a couple of things. I am the director for the creative side of things. So I do artistic direction, I direct layout and graphic design on the pieces. And I also do game design and creative design, which means essentially save for some little bits of work, especially on the atlases. Everything Fabula Ultima you see come out is written by me. And the stuff that you don't see written by me is still edited, and basically I work on it together with people. Basically, examples of these would be the sample locations that you find inside each atlas, and the bosses, the antagonists at the end of each atlas are not originally by me. People, basically, we work with a team of people, provide those creations, and then I come in, discuss it with them. We do have, some general ideas, and sometimes they are more strict, sometimes they are less strict. And at the end of the day, I take what they made, I rewrite it, put it together, check the formatting, whether it fits the kind of wording that Fabula Ultima uses and all that stuff. Then I send it back to them, and if they say, yes, I can still recognize it's my work, it's still telling the same kind of story, because this is a step. Right,
you don't want to change it too much.
Yeah, sometimes I always try to, adapt and improve, but I fortunately, I am quite good at recognizing what the soul of a given thing is. So if I do end up changing something, usually it doesn't, ruin the intent and the atmosphere. But, better safe than sorry. So whenever I'm able, what I do is actually just send back the PDF. They give it a quick read, and this way we know that the final stuff that goes to print functions within the game, but is also, respectful
sounds
and
cohesive.
True to,
it's all
copacetic. and is also, true to what the person wanted to say.
So you have other people doing some design bits and bobs, but it goes through you at the end of the day, no matter what.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is for basically all the mainline Fabula Ultima, because we can, for instance, think of Fabula Chronicles, which doesn't exist outside of Italy, and Fabula Chronicles was basically it's currently on hold, an organized play program for Fabula Ultima, and there I was only basically a counselor, like an advisor for how do we do this. For instance, this is organized play. How do we handle the Arcanist having to discover new arcana through exploration?
So
And
you
so
have
basically,
you have like an adventurers league thing, basically.
yes and no, because
Interesting.
the idea was to allow people who can't afford, a full campaign of Fabula Ultima to still see some progression.
Ah,
We didn't want them
That's
to
cool.
stay stuck in one-shot territory forever.
right.
But we also recognized that basically you had to hack the game in order for it to work that way. It's not the same game. It's not called Fabula Ultima Chronicles. It's called Fabula Chronicles for us, which is, it's a little bit more of a change. It's kind of like going from Blades in the Dark to Band of Blades. Yes,
I get that's a good comparison. I like that.
Okay,
you still have blades, but you do different things.
They're very
there.
different. Yeah, different stuff you're up to. Yeah.
We were actually going to bring up Blades in a bit. I feel like I have to ask, because you brought up Fabula Chronicles, and I'm so curious. Like, what is the hobby space like in Italy? Like, is it like in the U.S., Dungeons and Dragons sort of suffuses everything. It is the king of role-playing games. It is the thing by which everything else is judged. Is that the same for you? Is there another game that sort of takes that title?
So,
Isaiah out here jumping the shark.
we have, I love that the conversation is getting scattered already. Because, I'm like that too. Like,
all right, that's good.
I'm the tangent person, so whatever. We do have, like the tyrant is strong here too.
The tyrant? I've never heard of that.
Absolutely.
And, no, you're saying D&D. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I got it.
Yeah. We also have other tyrants, but then I would be getting into politics, and we don't have time for that.
Right.
And, but it's not just 5e. I would say that 5e has done what 5e has done is, especially during the pandemic.
Right.
Many people who had never played TRPGs have begun playing online, and the first thing they found was that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for instance, Chris Pagliari, who is the designer for 3 of the techno fantasy bosses, and is also the designer for all of the natural fantasy bosses.
Okay.
They started playing 5e during the pandemic. They didn't play TRPGs before.
Wait. They went from never playing to playing to designing.
Yeah, to full on.
Jesus.
That is
because
show.
they have a very good mentality. The correct mindset.
They must have gotten hooked with vigor.
To be fair, Josh.
And they're also, on the mechanics side, they're the kind of person who, when a new gacha comes out, like 1 week after, they are there with the sheet, and they're like, you need this item on this character,
One of those people. No, I get it.
Yeah, they're out there Ahabbing it hard.
Yeah.
You need that kind of, I'm not good at that.
That kind of chutzpah.
Yeah. Well,
what were you gonna say, Isaiah?
I was gonna say, you got to remember, you got to think, Josh. When did you and I start homebrewing our own mechanical stuff, playing 5e? Like for me, it was like 3 months in. I was like, I figured this out. I can.
Homebrewing, like just game does. Yeah. I mean, probably. Yeah, I mean, quick. Yeah, for sure. I don't know, but fast, definitely.
There's also the fact that this person specifically, Chris, already had, in terms of video games and board games, like the brain already had the training.
Was already in that direction. Yeah, I get it. It makes perfect sense.
But to answer your original question, basically, a lot of people came into 5e this way or through organized play.
Yeah.
But we kind of have to talk about, Milan, Rome, like the big cities where organized play means evenings with 50 people. Mm-hmm. And there were also specific game clubs and game associations that made a unique effort to not run the adventures of the official organized play. for D&D, but instead created something different, an initiative called Codex Venator, which took a fair bit of inspiration from Bloodborne. And so basically they played in a fake Renaissance Italy, within the context of having vampires and stuff like that.
Old history
and so they actually, I guess, put in the vampire, the masquerade kind of, I belong to a specific clan into the D&D organized play, because you have the families of hunters and things like that. Yeah. And
please.
In Italy, that kind of, socializing and having the faction play, if you will, generally gets people very, very into it. Because it's basically, it's the football, or I guess, I never know if I have to say football or soccer, but whatever.
You know what you mean.
The one where you kick the black and white ball.
Exactly. It's that kind of phenomenon,
Yes.
Like you get teams, people cheer for different factions and things like that. And the other thing is they always mix the table. Like the table doesn't have all people of a single faction.
Right, of course. It's funny you say, I don't know if I should say football or soccer, because it kind of doesn't matter, because you say football and you mean the one where you kick with your feet, and we think the one where you throw the pigskin, but the analogy works for both games, because in America we also get really factional about our American football teams, so it works either way.
It's true, we don't have football clubs.
In Italy, there's definitely a difference. Like football is in a league of its own.
I know. Rest. Yeah, in terms of popularity, for sure.
Yeah. But basically, we do have 5th edition that definitely captured the attention of a lot of I guess new generations. I mean, the game has been out for 10 years. So
it feels weird to say that, but yeah.
And then we have 3.5 and Pathfinder 1 that are staying strong, absolutely. Throughout, 4th edition basically never happened, except in the very few groups that, were very tactically minded, that appreciated that kind of gameplay. But like, it's 4th edition is more the kind of game that designers now play in order to learn stuff, because it's important for their job.
We've talked about that.
That's so funny. That's exactly what we've been seeing happen. Like over here, exact same thing. A lot of designers are going back to 4E, studying it, and then taking the good bits. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, and like a lot of people didn't really make the jump from 3.5 to 5th. Unless they had, maybe 5th is the game that they use with family, because it's simpler than forcing your son to
read
comply
3.5
with a 3.5 shit. I mean, but D&D is quite strong. However, I do have to say that there's quite a lot of competition. In Italy especially, there are maybe smaller groups of people, smaller communities tied to different games, but they are very, very enthusiastic. Like they make videos, they make actual play, they make tutorials, and I mean, it definitely is a bit of a sort of influencer situation.
Of course.
But I mean, that is one way that you get the game to go out and actually mean something to people. And another community that is thriving quite a lot is the OSR.
Yep.
We have a lot of people that were, very affectionate to red box kind of gameplay and things like that. And so now that we have these newer games that have a similar philosophy, or rather a similar presentation, but I've kind of figured out a few principles in order to make that kind of gameplay function
a little better.
Plus, there is a lot of support, like very small modules and things like that. That it's not the commitment of a 300 pages adventure. It's just, maybe it's a thing that you play in 2 or 3 sessions, and this kind of, more digest size experience has sort of helped. And then we have basically the vampire community still going fairly strong, but
no doubt in my mind.
Not really playing tabletop. That community is a lot more focused on LARPing.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Like we
have that here too.
We do.
Yeah, they rarely use, the paper rules.
Right.
They do purchase the books because they are interested, in
the lore,
how they describe the lore and the various powers. Like, maybe the powers are from the same list, but the way they manifest and function is instead handled in a LARP sense. So usually with simplified mechanics and things like that. And then you have, a whole slew of mid-ground titles, and you have indies and smaller games. But at that point, you tend to see less of a dedicated community to one specific game, and more like a shared community of people that are enthusiastic about exploring
RPGs in general.
These games.
Yeah. That's kind of, me and Isaiah are kind of like that, where it's less about one particular game and more about just like a bunch of different ones. I love playing different stuff. I always talk about like you should read and play any RPGs you can if you have any interest in like understanding it a little deeper.
You usually have maybe your game of comfort, which rarely is the best game you ever read.
Right.
This is just a game that you feel at home with it, even if it's half broken.
Yep.
And then you have the kind of shelf with all the various games that you want to try, the ones that you have never tried, the ones that you have bought and have read, the ones that you haven't even read because I don't say I'm stingy, okay? I do buy games quite frequently, but I do try to pace myself and not come home from a convention with something like 20 games.
Yes.
I 5 is okay. But man, I have a backlog here that I look behind me and it's
a massive shelf.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
We have that. Like me and Josh, we've looked at different Blades hacks, 5e hacks, a little less common, but like Fabula Ultima, Lancer, Beam Saber, the Dune RPG, we've got a million.
Avatar Legends that came out recently.
And so to your point, the comfort game, I would be remiss if I didn't bring him up. The reason why we even found Fabula is a friend of ours that we went to school with named Gennaro. And like I said, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout him out. He listens to us. We call him Paladin. That's his screen name. He's given me permission to say his name. But he had come to us with this thing and was like, guys, it's Final Fantasy, but D&D. And we were like, what you talking about, Willis? And he read it and was like, it's amazing. You need to read it. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll give it a shot. And in the course of one night, I opened the book up, I started reading and was like, oh, that's really cool. Hold on. That's really cool. Hold on. And it got to the point where I read the whole book in one night, which is insane for me. I'm a super slow reader.
Yeah, he never does that.
I sent it to Josh and was like, you need to read this. We need to talk about this on podcast. This is the coolest shit.
I don't know if we will have time or if the topic will come up later. So I'm going to say it now. Because I don't know if people who are making games will listen to this. But one of the reasons why you were able to do that is that the entire game was designed like within InDesign. It wasn't written and then I did the layout. The entire thing was designed for usability since moment zero.
I'm pretty sure. I think we even said when we were the first recording we did, I think we mentioned that the layout, right? Isaiah, we mentioned the layout making it very easy to read. So that it came through.
I'm trying to improve it still. And one thing I did was I had a few friends that with various, some suffering from daltonicism, some with ADHD, some with dyscalculia or dyslexia. And they had the kindness to actually sit down and take a look. And when there was something that, you should break it down, you should put it a different way, they had the patience to tell me. And I didn't have to change, 1,000 things. It was probably like a dozen. But trust me, paying attention to that kind of stuff has made it very, very, because it's not a simple game and it's not a short game. And so
but it feels short.
Yeah, but
it feels short.
But what I'm trying to say is, if you're listening to this and are working on a book, do not take that stuff for granted. Like,
for sure.
Games are hard to learn enough already. At least try to, maybe not completely overcome, because sometimes it's not possible to be 100% accessible. But the more accessible you can be without, betraying what your game is about, do it. Highly encourage it.
So, the funny thing, two things. One is, after what you were just talking about in terms of how play is over in Uli, sounds almost identical to how it is over here for us, which is interesting because I would not have expected that, given like language barrier and stuff like that. But it sounds pretty similar.
Well, most games I mentioned have been translated.
Right? Yeah, I guess that's enough. Yeah. But the thing I was gonna say that's funny is, because Isaiah was like, "Oh, I sat down and read it in a day." The first time I looked at the game, I bounced off a little bit because I was jumping around. Because that's usually how I start an RPG book: is I open it and I jump around to the bits that I'm always most interested. Like, I'll often look at leveling, like how does level up / reward structure work? How do classes work? Is there like a GM section that I think seems like it's doing something cool? Like, I jump around a lot. So I jumped around in Fabula and it kind of bounced off of me because I was like, this is not making sense. But then when Isaiah was like, we're talking about it, I was like, okay, so I started reading it more from the beginning with a little jumping around still. Yeah. But once I read from the start, I was like, oh, this is much more comprehensive than I initially thought it was, but because I did it in a weird way. But since you're saying that you essentially you laid it out in a different way than I guess other companies are potentially laying out, that makes sense of why my usual way of doing it was strange. And then if I did it the normal way, it worked out.
Yeah, there's two sides to this. So one is the idea of starting work directly in layout.
Right.
And this is not something that companies usually do because honestly, it sucks for them.
Fair enough.
Companies do much better with, sort of a chain of operations in which one person makes the text, another person proofreads. There is editing,
proofreading, all that,
and everything. When the text is finished, the text is given to a
layout person,
graphic designer, to kind of come up with a graphic design project for the entire project, and then those elements are given to usually another graphic that is part of the company. I mean, it depends on the size of the company. The smaller the company, the more these people all become the same person. But basically, there's different steps, and so as a writer, it's not exactly normal for you to be able to look at the finished thing and say, no, this illustration should be on the opposite page because it hints at the meaning of the words that I have used in this sentence. Or you shouldn't break down this example, between an odd and an even numbered page because by flipping the page to read, the people ruin themselves of the surprise of what's coming later. Like, this kind of stuff is simply not done because normally every person, has their job. Right. And in a team effort, you do have, this is more something that a lead says, but not that the original writer says.
Yeah.
The other thing is that normally a writer is just a writer. Instead, I am also a graphic designer, an illustrator, and an art director. And it's true that Neat Games picked up Fabula Ultima, and it definitely couldn't have, become a true finished book. But before, it was already, the core book already had the layout. I had already laid out the entire book as part of Patreon, because the game was in development for several years on Patreon.
Right.
And so essentially what happened was that there were specific, spots and emptiness for determined images of different sizes to be slotted in. And this is sort of something that the bigger you go, the less possible it becomes. So I think it's one of the big advantages of indies, this kind of total control in terms of creativity and presentation that you can have as an author. Obviously, it kind of implies having quite a bit of different skills, which not everyone will have. And that's, that's normal. Like, it's absolutely fine to instead go through the standard process. But it does showcase, this sort of additional potential for keeping the eye of the spectator
in mind
on the page, kind of hooking their attention.
Yeah, I mean, in indie video game devs will say a similar thing, right? Because the team is smaller, the vision can be more direct and succinct because you don't have to go through a whole bunch of people and keep everyone on the same page. So yeah,
we are absolutely talking about the basically user interface. Which is,
exactly.
Again, it's UX design.
Yeah.
Where do I find this data? In which order is it presented? The fact that you read the book from start to finish instead of jumping around is also because I was writing for video game users. I was not writing for tabletop RPG players.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but was that to follow the design philosophy that this is supposed to feel like Final Fantasy, and therefore it should sort of feel like a video game?
Yes, in some ways. The most important point to me was there was a part that was basically, if you want, a matter of market. Like the tabletop RPG public, the tabletop RPG audience is already a very saturated market. I don't say this only in the sense of economy. I say this in the sense of attention as well. Like, to me, a successful game isn't necessarily a game that makes a lot of money, but it is a game that gets played. Otherwise, it just sits, on the shelf. And in order for a game to be played, it has to beat a lot of competition. Mm-hmm. And the closer you stay to the audience of standard TRPGs, the less free you are in a way, and the more competition you face, and also the more, in a way, preconceptions. And I didn't want any of that. What I wanted wasn't for, the D&D player to play Fabula Ultima instead. What I wanted was for the video game Final Fantasy player
to get into RPGs,
to find out that they can get into RPGs, and I wanted their first time to be with a system that doesn't gaslight you.
I see. Now, to sort of bounce off the previous question, usually when someone creates a custom thing and breaks into a certain market, that's usually to fill a niche that they want to see in that market, right? So was Fabula Ultima something that you created because you wanted a game like that, either because you wanted a game that felt like Final Fantasy, a game that played like Final Fantasy?
This was the game that never existed and I always wanted to play. Like, when I was 13, 14, I began playing tabletop RPGs when I was 11. And my first experience was with a very lightweight system that was actually in development, where you basically had 3 stats, and those stats had scores that ranged from 1 to 4. And for every point, you wrote a word that was like a specialization. And that was it. Okay? And then I go to high school, and there's all the people, like the kids from the richer families, and they have these big books, I'm talking 3.5. So, they have this aura of mystery, of mystique. And like we sit down to play, and I can't understand a thing initially. Like nothing makes sense to me. I don't know why. No, it's just, why does 18 mean 4? Why can't I write 4?
Yeah.
That's a common
why
one.
do I have to roll when I attack and then I roll when I hit? And why do I have to put points in just being able to tie my own shoes? Now, bear in mind, nowadays, I know what role those mechanics, absolve.
Right.
Like, I know why they are there. But I'm talking about, since my first experience wasn't with a system of that density, I could look at all of that and see it as not strictly necessary.
Right.
Which was a major advantage in me becoming a designer, because I can always strip down, because I know that the heart of the game isn't in the little, it's not in the +1 and the +2. The heart is somewhere else. But at least, since, everyone was playing these, I decided, well, it's a fantasy game. We have mages, we have thieves, we have warriors, and there's even the monk, so we can have the brawler. Yeah. And I liked Final Fantasy. I encountered Final Fantasy a lot earlier than I encountered tabletop RPGs, because my first contact was with Final Fantasy X.
Yes,
when I was still,
shout out to 10, baby. It's all about the Blitzball.
and I was still in elementary school, basically. And because in Italy, the timing was, I think I was 11, so maybe the summer between elementary and middle school, I guess. And I was fascinated. Like, there were so many incredible and unique vistas. The monsters were all so weird, and then you had, you use the correct element, and the boss had the move that you had to anticipate, and I tried for basically 5 years to make that stuff work in D&D. And obviously, this was my mistake, because I was not understanding what kind of game it was. So I was forcing it out of its comfort zone to be closer to mine, and it very much didn't work. So this is essentially, Fabula Ultima is me making the kind of game that I wanted to have put in my hands when I was 13. And
that's awesome.
Many art breakers begin this way.
Yes.
So there is this danger, but luckily I've waited enough and made games in the meantime. So this is not my first game, which also helped, because boy oh boy, you don't want your first thing to be your most important thing.
You hear that a lot, from a lot of creatives. Never. It's a lot of directors say never direct the movie you want to direct. Direct a couple movies and then direct
favor.
And then direct what you want to direct.
Yep. I mean, I was gonna say, because wow, that whole train of thought went everywhere. In reference to Isaiah's question, like, you say pretty succinctly in the foreword of Fabula Ultima, like, why you made the game. So I would just recommend everybody give that a quick read, because it gets that point across that you were just saying, quick and easy. But we have a very important question that we skipped over. This is vital, deeply vital. Top 3 Final Fantasy games.
Top 3?
Top 3. We're giving you top 3. You don't have to pick one.
All right. It's gonna be Final Fantasy X.
Excellent choice.
Final Fantasy VII. And Final Fantasy Tactics.
Ooh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting
classic bangers.
My top 3 are 10, 7, and 4. And
I getcha.
And I was hoping for that 4, but
so 4 is complicated for me. I really like the characters. The plot is at a certain point it becomes a circus of nobody dying, everybody dying, and sacrifices that aren't sacrifices, and it's weird all over. I really like Cecil. I don't like how the characters evolve and like how it ends with you girls stay behind. The boys have to do this when these two girls can basically crack open the planet. But that
That's fair. Like, that's very
definitely
fair.
a game of its time. But it's tactics is just so raw. Like tactics is just it stabs you from moment one. I couldn't, if I had to include anything adjacent, I would put Tactics Ogre instead.
I've heard that one too. Yeah.
Instead of Final Fantasy Tactics, because that's my preferred Matsuno work. Because that one goes hard, really. Like it's ferocious.
I have heard.
Yeah,
I have heard.
It chews you and spits you out.
Yeah.
I just quick addendum question: have you played 14 at all?
I have played 14 for a while. Yes.
Okay.
Regadin Monk.
Okay. Yeah, because 10 was my favorite for a long time, but I've put so much into 14 that it has eclipsed it, which sometimes feels weird to say, but
I don't really consider 14 part of the line.
I've heard people say that too.
Because to me, it's an MMO. I consider it a Final Fantasy, obviously, but it's too different. The MMO is too different.
My counter argument, my little like pushback on that is always that yes, the game part for sure, but the story of 14, I feel like
no, yeah, the story
feels very true.
Fine. Yeah.
We just make a quick shout out to you're a Rogadin player. Nice. It's
I played
the rarest
female,
of them all.
Female Rogadin.
Oh my god, a female Rogadin. The rarest of them all.
The rarest of them all. Let's go. Look,
that's funny.
I played a Lala for 3 years, and I just switched over to Hyur just because I was tired of none of the clothes fitting right.
None of the clothes fitting right.
Look, I'm sorry. I get
it. It's just a funny way to say it.
And I literally went, okay, I want to play something else, and I'm going to be fucked if I play a bunny boy because everyone does that, and cats are the exact same. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to play a human.
My heart goes out to all the bunny boys.
Like, I was like, oh, male Vieira? Hell yeah. And then everyone and their mom did it, and I was like, never mind.
I love being a bunny boy.
Like, I did it purely statistically. I was like, what will give me the most good-looking stuff all the time? Human.
Yeah, that's kind of true. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the reasoning was simple. I can't be a buff doll lady in real life. At least I can be that in a.
That's a good reasoning.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we get a round of applause?
That's an excellent reasoning. I can't be a buff doll lady in real life.
I mean, anyone who saw the illustration for the dancer in High Fantasy probably knows like what I would like to look like. But no, that's not feasible. Sorry.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah,
makes complete sense.
Oh no!
Can't argue with that logic.
What's her name? With the Rogadin lady that I love so much from Limsa. Meryl Webb. Oh, my queen.
Yeah.
Queen.
She's the one for the Marine Alliance, right?
Yeah. The Limsalo Mensa squad.
Yeah.
City.
Yeah, no, she has like impeccable clothing. Impeccable.
She does. It's true.
Yep. Clothing on point. Hair magnificent.
Exactly.
It's funny. I've had a similar logic before where I always like playing the weird monstrous races a lot of the time in MMOs because I'm like, well, I can't be a goblin in real life, but I could be a funny little goblin guy here.
Exactly.
So
it's all about that.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure.
He likes playing lizards.
I also do like playing lizard characters. It's true.
Anyway. No, I'm definitely more martial oriented.
Oh no, not wizard, lizards, like the animal.
Oh, lizard.
Yes, like reptiles.
Oh, he likes playing Snake.
Right.
I
Actually,
play Snake.
My first tabletop RPG character for that game that I mentioned back then was a lizard man because I liked the lizards from Warhammer.
Nice.
He was a physician.
Yeah.
I don't mean like a physician, like Black Doctor. I mean like white cloak and everything. Like a physician, a normal physician, but also a lizard man. And in a way, it worked fine, which is probably what got me into this whole rabbit hole of tabletop RPGs.
Right.
Because I was like, excuse me, I can do this and it makes sense and we can play with it. All right.
I'm in. Yeah, although I am also a wizard fan too. I do like playing the magic users. So this one's a little jump, but I have to know the answer to this question, but it's also going to require me to explain a little bit. So bear with me. It's a little bit of a long-winded. So when we were looking at the class system in Fabula, which both me and Isaiah love a lot. I was looking at it and I was like, oh, you use the phrase class and it refers to itself as a class-based system, but it's almost kind of lying a little bit, because in a way the classes are a package of abilities that you're picking and choosing. So it's sort of a classless system. And then I thought, okay, so if you're going to do what is effectively a classless system, why not just have a big long list of abilities? Because what a lot of classless systems do is they'll go, okay, we need to make sure there's abilities to play like a paladin style character. So they'll take all of the abilities that would be a paladin class, and then they'll rip them apart and put them in the in whatever place. So there'll be a lay on hands ability, and there will be a divine smite ability, so on and so forth. But they don't reference the original class idea. You just read them and you can kind of get an idea if you put them together. And so I was like, why not just do that? The conclusion I came to when I was reading through Fabula is, by putting them in these little class packages, you essentially make a classless system feel a little more approachable, because I can go, I want to play a dark sword wielding type character. Oh, there's a dark blade class. I know if I take the abilities from here, this should do what I want in terms of game feel. Was that the intention, or am I pulling something out extra from it and you had a different idea? What was the idea there?
Okay, so how much time do we have for this chat?
A decent amount.
Okay, so there's several reasons, and some of them are gonna sound very high concept, and maybe some people listen to this transmission and maybe their idea of me that they have changes.
I like high concept, so I'm in.
So, absolutely, accessibility is important, okay? I could have made a list. I could have made a list with internal talent trees. So, for instance, bind and summon is now a requisite for the other abilities that you find within Arcanist.
Of course.
I could have bundled them the same way they are now, but called them something different, which in the end people would have referred to as class. So I decided I didn't want to fight human nature.
Right, just use the word. Yeah.
Exactly, because that's what happens. There's also another thing. People keep saying, why didn't you call them jobs? That works for English, but in every other language,
it's
either
weird.
You retain a job in order to evoke, the JRPG vibe, or it's just a profession job. Like it doesn't. It's not a term that you use, and class is already what we have in tabletop RPGs. You could call them careers. You could call them career trees. There's I considered all of it, and in the end, it was the shortest word, the word that was most likely to be translated in a similar way across languages, and I was, okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, okay.
Translation is definitely worth paying attention to for sure, in the modern era, obviously.
Yeah,
there's also the game began in English.
Right.
So the official language for Fabula Ultima is English, even if it's made in Italy. Okay, so Italy was the second language, and then the rest was again, Need Games handles those two languages. The rest is partners. So for those other languages, there is more liberty, but class is a word which also, due to, I guess, international importance, tends to be similar, close, I think. Regardless, I mean, I haven't read all the translations. I only checked the Italian and English. I'm sure that some of the partners will have translated some terms in ways that are different from what maybe I would expect.
Right.
And it's fine. Like, within the liberties of a partner, when you purchase, the license for translation, there is also adaptation, obviously, because essentially we trust that people who live immersed in a given language know more than us about how to, make a book within that language.
Yeah, of course.
But there's a
makes
couple
sense.
other reasons.
Yeah, I mean that's the translation versus localization thing, right? Where it's like this word makes sense grammatically, but there is a
cultural
Precisely.
thing.
No matter what Twitter these days seems to have in mind for literal translation of video games, that is a shitty idea. Because you have to trust that the people who work in translation know more than you, the average user, about how to handle a sentence. If we want to talk about those people not being put in the condition to work properly because they are given partial transcripts and stuff like that, all right. But it's not like they are doing their job badly if they don't do literal translation. Because, listen, we had some literal translations in the past for Ghibli movies, and they are today in Italy among the greatest memes.
Yeah,
ever
they're
made.
nonsensical as hell. Yeah.
They are incredible, like sentences that no one. I mean, maybe after 5 beers,
You might say it. Yeah.
I would talk like that. But tough.
Yeah.
And another reason why classes work that way, well, I mean, I do have to mention that the game initially, I was using Ryutama as a skeleton for it.
Right.
Originally it worked right like Ryutama. 10 levels, you did 5 levels in a class, and then 5 levels you picked on another. Very quickly, when I began my research part of the project, and the research part was basically dissecting every single Final Fantasy protagonist and figuring out if it could be built. I realized that no, these guys are complex.
That must have been a weird rabbit hole to dissect all the Final Fantasy MCs.
I do quite a lot of that kind of work, like especially for the atlases. Like, obviously, I don't have the time to play all the games that I mentioned. But I watch retrospectives, I do research, there's a lot of work in what I do that is basically writing textbooks on video games. Yeah. Because these books kind of end up being that, especially atlases. Like, the first half is basically me saying, I think there's something in common with this kind of games, and I guess it can be translated to the table, but you should pay attention to these key elements if you want to do that, if you want the vibe. And so, but for the core book, the research was mostly, can we actually make this kind of character? Excluding characters that should not be, possible. Because I have my opinions, and I think that some characters are too varied, or some characters are not player characters. Told you, I love Final Fantasy X. Lulu is not a player character. Doesn't evolve enough, doesn't have enough to her, doesn't, no. Sorry.
I see what you're saying, right? So if they don't fill the right, you can't have someone. Well, it's like the Avatar Legends role-playing game brings this up. No, you can't play the Avatar because the Avatar is the sole protagonist. If you play the Avatar in an RPG, then someone becomes the most important character and everyone else doesn't matter. Or matters
I guess
less.
It's the opposite in this case.
In this case,
I encourage people to play Yuna would be the Avatar equivalent. Right. And you very much want to play a character to play her. I've seen many groups go for the Guardians concept and treat that kind of character as an NPC to avoid, one PC stepping on the toes of others. And that's a terrible mistake. Right. You don't want an NPC to be the most important member of the part of the story. Right. Don't go back to playing D&D with a linear adventure written by a professional, okay? Don't do that. We made Fabula Ultima so that you could have ownership over this story. Take it, seize it. And in the context of Final Fantasy X, this means that Yuna is a player character, Tidus is a player character,
Right.
Waka. Unfortunately, Waka is a player character, and Lulu is not.
My boy.
And Riku, definitely, because these are all characters that change, evolve, and discover. Auron is funny. Auron
I was just about to ask about Auron.
Yeah.
Auron, he is to me the mentor player character, but he's also, the kind of character that goes away halfway through the campaign, either with a sacrifice or retired, and you bring in someone else.
I'm a huge Fire Emblem player, and we call those characters the EXP trap because they're like really strong, and they're the character you're like, they do so good. You want to level them up, and then they die, and all the
Enjoy
XP
them
goes
while
for
they last.
it's just worthless. And you're just like, I'm just gonna sit in the corner and cry.
I'm sad now.
And if you made the mistake of only leveling them up, so taking away kills from the rest of the party.
Yep. Old school RPGs. I feel like they do that less these days, thankfully, because so many people got annoyed about that kind of crap.
Yeah.
You have a lot of safety nets. But it's also because nowadays you don't really have all the free time to, redo the entire thing.
Yes, true.
And but regardless of what is now probably the second tangent, going back a little bit to the question about classes, there is also the matter of torture. I love to torture players. I love to torture myself as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Where am I going? And I said, people might think different about me. I don't want anyone to be 100% satisfied with the character they made. Okay? So by making it that you have to combine 2 or 3 classes, you can never have... Because if I made that just a list, you could just cherry pick whatever you think is the most meta, ideal, optimal build. This way, you are always denied the complete satisfaction of completely mastering a class, because no class has only 10 levels of options. So you will always leave something outside. This is also important, of course, because this way we can have 2 or 3 weapon masters in our group, and they are not the same character. There's definitely some classes, I tell you, that are designed to have multiple copies in a party, and some that are not. Like, I don't think you should ever have 2 chimeras. I don't think you should have 2 arcanists. I don't think you should have 2 commanders, or 2 dancers, or... I don't know, like 2 dark blades. No, because those classes have themes within their mechanics as well. Like, they bring in a specific kind of pattern of play and of psychological, emotional reaction. Like, for instance, how the dark blade, expresses pain, and you want one character to be about that. You don't want to, because at that point is basically it's a race to whoever has the more traumatized character, and it's fine. JRPG characters should be heavily have a heavy conscience, but not in the same way, because if you have 2 characters, it's always the same thing. If you have 2 characters fulfilling the same role, one of them is bound to do it better than the other, and that is where comparison begins, and that is where dissatisfaction begins. So each character should be, about 2 or 3 things, and maybe, they share one of these with another person, but never all of them. And some classes are really a bit too, funneling in terms of how you play them. But going back to the thing about torturing people, it is so that people are always tormented by this idea of the choice that they cannot make.
You have to pick which one you want to go with. You can't have it all.
Exactly. And classes are an easy way to sort of enforce a certain thing. Like, you choose Darkblade, very well. I've given you ways to spend your health, ways to regenerate your mind points, regenerate your HP, and ways to establish bonds in the thick of things when something happens, mostly. And I can also reactively study enemies that wound me. I also am bound to use dark damage when I use Shadow Strike.
Right.
All right. This would work really good with the ability to transform my hit into a multi-target hit. Because now Shadow Strike, I pay life once, but 2 enemies get extra damage dealt on them because now my hit is AoE. So that's Weapon Master. And Weapon Master, is also amazing because I bring in counter attack. So when they hit me, there's a chance I counter them, and I also learn something about them with Painful Lesson. Plus, I can make my weapon more accurate. Breach is a decent skill, I guess, but it takes up my skill action that I would use for Shadow Strike, so I have to think about it. And then there is Bone Crusher, and Bone Crusher lets me, when someone just resists or is immune to darkness, maybe I can switch to being a debuffer,
Right.
Great. But damn, Fury is nice. Fury has the adrenaline to when I go in crisis, I deal more damage.
Right,
all right. And I can also provoke, so I can force them to care about me. However, we don't have a tank in the group. Damn, I should also have Protect. And now it's 4 classes, and I have to choose.
Yeah.
Granted, 12 levels from now, you can take your 4th class. But my invitation is not to say, in 12 levels, I will also be a Guardian. My invitation is to look at the party, decide what they actually need. Maybe someone already can do AoE damage, and you don't need that. But maybe there is a squishy mage who really wants someone with Protect being able to, deny that final last hit that will be a problem. And maybe as things go, you discover that maybe your part of the plot is the first thing we deal with, and you kind of change and stuff like that. And maybe it makes sense for you to pick Spiritist and become more of a support and have Light and Dark because you have now known Despair and Hope. And that's how you play this game, But the point is, I kind of wanted to basically prevent a too ideal kind of beginning.
You can't start as an absolutely perfect character. I mean, that makes a lot. I didn't even consider that angle of it, but that makes a lot of sense for sure.
Interesting. I mean, so that funny that sort of answers one of the questions I had. The idea of what was something in the game done for simplicity's sake or to encourage the narrative nature of the game.
So almost kind of both in that example.
Yeah, and also a third thing, which is replayability.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, duh.
Damn it. I could have taken, I could have disregarded Bladestorm entirely, and instead I could have picked up counterattack.
Right.
God damn it, I would have been great. And some people are like, so there should be a retraining in the game because I think I made a mistake. My opinion is there is no retraining rules in the game because I either provide them and then everybody retrains all the time.
Yep.
Or I say that it's forbidden, and then someone who is genuinely just at their first experience and made a poor decision has to eat shit for the entirety of the campaign, and I don't want any of that. So instead, I decided to resort to people being able to agree that, sometimes it makes sense to make a little adjustment when the situation is not, is untenable. But
yes. My
original idea is that you can't retrain precisely because I want you to try that kind of stuff on your next character. I don't want, and I guess there's also another element. I don't want eternal campaigns for Fabula Ultima.
Yes. Thank you.
30 sessions. 30 sessions is plenty to explore a JRPG.
He said 30.
Oh no!
I'm vindicated. I'm vindicated.
God,
I always say I always say I'm like 30 is the beautiful campaign number. It's the magic number. I always say that.
For the long campaign. For the long campaign.
Several hour long debate that we had where Josh was like 30 sessions for Fabula maximum. And I was like, well, you could probably push 50.
So listen, yes, you can absolutely do 50. I think that you want to do 30 with the optional rule for leveling up faster, or you want to do 50 without that rule, but you really take it at a slower pace, and you sort of have, you go full on Kisho Tenketsu with the campaign, like 4-act structure, and you have a fake finale, and then you have a last arc of the campaign.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff, 50 or at least 40 sessions, I can see it. But most of the time I've seen that really, it's not that, this is another misconception people often have. You have shared world creation and you put in a bunch of stuff. The game is not resolved when you have used all of it.
Right.
The game is resolved when the characters are resolved.
Right.
And you will absolutely throw away a bunch of the things. Like half of the mysteries maybe didn't mean much. This neighboring region, well, I guess if we make a sequel campaign in which everybody, by the way, starts from level 5 because JRPG sequel, maybe we can use that region. But honestly, it's more to give you an abundance of elements, but then kind of don't overstay your welcome. We've had some fun campaigns at 10 sessions, and obviously this means that like no fucking around. Like this is every episode is meaningful. Every episode we dissect an essential part of one of the protagonists and we go against the villain. Pam pam pam. Like and
fast.
In that case we had 4 protagonists, and essentially it was 2 sessions of setup and then 8 sessions I would say of exploring the various characters, doing the tour of the region, dealing with the main villains, and then final villain, last session, and then we did an additional session for just basically rolling the credits and describing the future of the various characters, which by the way is one of my biggest regrets in the game. I didn't provide a procedure for a
epilogue
closing session for the epilogue. I do want to do that in the future.
That's funny. I always do that kind of thing just naturally, but I could understand why you'd want to have it in there.
So I have a small of like dovetailed question to the session count.
Wait, before you say that real quick, could I just say this is a little backtrack, but the retraining thing, my ultimate counter argument to like why is there no retrain in the system is always because you're playing a tabletop RPG. You can ignore the rules at any time you want. Just have a chat with your GM.
Disagree. I heartily disagree.
Oh, no.
I think all rules are rules. Procedures are rules. And literally when the game gives you like principles and stuff, that is all rules.
Oh yeah, you should always play to the principles for sure.
My point is less about disregarding and is more about because disregarding is a broad statement about the validity of the rule. In my view, it's more about the select environment of the group that agrees to handle it in a certain way. That is why I essentially detest like the online conversations about we did this homebrew, this house rule, because it always devolves into a clash of perspectives that are all essentially, looking inward. Like someone comes to me and says, oh yeah, we played Fabula Ultima, but everyone has 1 hit point. And I'm like,
what the hell?
The fuck?
Yeah.
But you know what? There's a 1% possibility that it actually works because they have failed to tell me that they've changed another 20 things.
Something else, yeah.
Yep. And like, the point is that we kind of suck at communication. And so like, I wanted to stop you because no, I don't want people to read these as the group is more important than the system, but also the group should be mindful of the fact that the system is very important and that they might hurt themselves if they don't know what they're doing.
I always agree that the system is super important. I'm just saying, what I was saying is, if you get to a point where you're just really, really deeply frustrated, like I super fucked up, then it's like every once in a while you can pull the ripcord. But no, I agree. You should be beholden to the system as much as you possibly can, because
and not
that's
because
the point.
System is holy, you know, like or because I wrote it. I'm the same way about games made by other people. In fact,
I am too.
I am more protective about games made by others than my own, especially since Fabula really has within itself quite a lot of, you know, bending parts. It's not tightly designed because the kind of media that it wants to evoke are too broad, and you can't really be tightly focused. And that is a defect in a way. It is a flaw, but it was kind of an impossibility. But
it's an acceptable flaw, quote unquote. It's like an acceptable, understandable flaw. Like you can't really do it. It's out of your power, you know?
Yeah, basically whatever, like the only way for the tools to be completely tight would be to take away a lot of them, which means excluding a lot of narratives that I think should be part of this kind of game.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and but I guess what I wanted to say was that okay, just a second. Brain. No, about the fact of me being protective of games made by others. It comes down to, you know, the torture I was talking about. Perhaps the game is now frustrating me in order to teach me something.
Right, frustrating on purpose almost.
Yeah, and because as I told you, yes, the inexperienced person who maybe put a D6 in their might, and they picked no HP classes, and they don't have a tank, they're gonna get smashed into the ground every single fight. Because they are inexperienced, and because, frankly, the rest of their group isn't caring for them. Okay? No one here is doing their job. And I don't want that person to feel like they can't move around their D8 dexterity into a D8 might, because honestly, going from 6 to 8 in dexterity is entirely irrelevant, while going from 6 to 8 in might means surviving one additional blow. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that you can't understand unless you are practical with the system. That dexterity is a high investment stat, which pays big, but you have to go above the 10. So unless you had other ways to, you know, if that 8 meant having 11 instead of 9, then we can talk. But if that 8 was just having 9 instead of 7, it's essentially irrelevant. And you can't know that. And you will learn that. And the initial lesson is already the lesson, okay? That is a change that you should be allowed to make because it's okay. There are other changes, such as I decided to cut the health of enemies in half because every combat was a slog. Well, when you look at the party and you see that no one is doing a damage type other than physical, and so they're basically playing Pokemon with action, like with normal type only teams.
Right.
You're like, no. If you do that, it's true, the game now functions for you, but you have basically ensured that you will never understand how this game actually works in terms of its demands, you know, for how you play it tactically. So it's delicate. Knowing when to change something and when you are instead, you know, barring yourself from learning about the game. Then again, I put learning about a new game very high in my list of priorities when I try a game.
Same.
Many people don't really care about that. They just want, you know, the fun time with friends.
Yep.
And I think that, honestly, different games, it's not just playing the same game with different perspectives. It's just, no, some games really, like, I don't know if you guys know Knights of Last Call.
I do not.
I do not.
Okay. They did a stream recently about Draw Steel, Matt Colville's game.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they were talking about the difficulty in reconciling the tactical part with the cinematic part. Because tactical means that if you make a mistake, you suck and you die. And cinematic means heroes never die. And so, no, those are two different games. And obviously, the team at Draw Steel definitely asked this question because they have created, a middle ground in which you do need to make important tactical choices. The bad tactical choices, it's tough for them to end your campaign, but they could, evolve into complications, which is similar to how Fabula Ultima handles the fact that if really everything goes to hell, you surrender, and I guess, yes, the city was burnt.
Right.
We go on from there. Because heroes aren't really about winning, heroes are about, struggling.
Right, the struggle,
overcoming. And so you kind of have to find your equilibrium in that. But it's what I meant when I said different games really ought to be played in a certain way, or they will absolutely, be kind of miserable as an experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
so
No,
we
makes
always we always say, the two of us, and our former host as well,
Our friends included.
you should always play the game rules as written first time around. Because if you start changing things and you haven't played the game and you don't understand the game, you haven't sort of put yourself in the mindset of the creator when they were writing it while you're running it, you'll change something and go, oh, this is meaningless. But then 20 other rules bounce off of that thing, and now a quarter of the game doesn't function right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it functions right in your perspective, but has become meaningless.
Yeah.
Which is
Also,
also
sorry,
the
Isaiah,
other risk.
I didn't expect that to tangent into
No,
a
you're
long
good. You're
thing.
good. So, I mean, the dovetail question.
It's my fault.
It's okay.
It's
It's
all good.
okay. Look, I'm sitting here quietly
just
because
funny.
you've got a lot to say, and I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
So, so you said, 30 sessions is perfect campaign time. Now, the book says that you should be leveling up once every other session. And obviously in 30 sessions, you will not be hitting your max level of 50. Was the game not designed to hit level cap, and you're just you're given that extra room if you want to have it?
Well, to be more precise, the guaranteed level up is once every other session.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Not taking Fabula points and Ultima points into account.
Mhm.
In practice, what usually happens is a pattern that goes a little bit like no, yes, yes, no, yes, yes. Okay? So you don't level up, then you level up for 2 sessions, then you don't level up. Usually that's kind of how it goes. However, to respond to your question, the game is built for level 50, but it's not built with the expectation that you need level 50 in order to reach a satisfying conclusion.
I see.
Basically, how to put it? We are used to JRPGs going, up to level 100, or 19. Sorry, 99. This game does 5 to 50. You basically have to have the number. So you start at level 5, that would be level 10 in a video game. Your max level is 50, which would be the equivalent of level 100 in a video game.
Right.
Okay. Originally, the progression was 100 levels, but I basically had to make it so that on one level you raised your MP and HP, and on the other you put in the skill point, and it was a lot of bookkeeping for really no benefit, including the way that HP scaled. It was much easier to, basically divide by 2 the progression.
Right.
What
Makes
this
sense.
means is also that usually you don't finish a video game at level 100.
True.
At least,
yeah,
at
true.
least the main plot,
Unless you grind it out, yeah.
Yeah, or again, you do some post-game super
Post-game,
bosses
yeah.
and things like that. So in Fabula Ultima, usually you end around level 70. It depends. Older games could end earlier, some games later, but let's go with 70 because sometimes it's 60, 65, 80, 75. Okay? Let's go with 70. 70 would be level 35 in Fabula. Okay?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So the power level is tailored so that you hit your peak, but I can still consider it reasonable and don't have to come up with a ton of bullshit every boss at around level 30. Okay?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
So-
that's interesting.
So basically, the thing is, reach level 30, campaign ends, you saw the standard arc. Then the last 20 levels are also where you go beyond, if you end the game at 30 levels, technically your 3 initial classes could be all that you care about for the entirety of the game. Unless you are like me and never master anything unless strictly necessary because you always want different classes to combine to do weird shit. But that's a me problem. This means that basically going beyond level 30 is where you accept that things are going to get weird and combos are going to get wacky. It's also where, okay, just let me check a thing because I don't want to say something stupid.
Busting out the notes.
Yeah, all right. Level 30 plus is 2000 Zenith reward limit.
Yes.
Yep.
40 plus, so the last 10 levels of the game, is any value. We essentially explicitly don't give a damn about what happens those last 10 levels. In what sense? Things still work generally, but the exponential combinations of elements between different classes and abilities and items and, I don't know, heroic skills, quirks, if you use quirks, I know, zero powers, you name it, mean that these characters are incredibly complex. Now, is this a problem for the game? Not really. If you started at level 5, technically everything you have is something you acquired gradually. So, and honestly, even the complicated level 50 character is probably equivalent to a level 3 wizard in D&D in terms of how much stuff I have, like the list. But there's definitely a thing about kind of the GM2 being, it has to be enthusiastic about the kind of enemies that they want to put out. Like, this is where you go silly with them. This is where you put an enemy that, okay, at the end of every round, every PC goes to 1 HP. Figure it out, folks. and
Figure it
like
out.
that.
Good luck.
Yeah, and they will, trust me. They will, because at that point, if they have bothered to learn to play, because that's the other thing, the game gets increasingly more punishing. I tried not to make the mistake of having enemies grow linearly, because I knew that heroes were going to grow exponentially.
Right.
So enemies do grow linearly too much, in a way. It's the famous, enemies basically auto-hit after level 30. And, well, they won't auto-hit if you swarm them with 3 different status effects. At that point, enemies are designed so that you will be being unfair, and they are made in such a way that they are fair once made, unfairly debuffed.
Right.
The game doesn't expect the boss to be able to do the mega move, automatic 50 damage to all PC every round. The game expects the players to be, okay, this is their last action of the round. We know that devastation is on the last turn. Stop. Or enrage, cannot perform spell action.
Right.
Screw it.
I mean, yeah, even D&D kind of does a similar thing, right? Where you sort of just throw crazy problems at high level 5e characters and go, I don't know how they're going to solve this, but they'll have something, so I'm not worried about it, right? And then inevitably they bust something out.
The difference for me is that in D&D, usually the kind of strength accumulated at those levels is more like I snap my fingers and I disintegrate it. While in this case, the strength still requires you to play out, the conflict. And it also means that for the GM, it's less about, oh yes, and this guy has an amulet of anti-disintegration. And it's more about, you do need to accumulate quite a bit of knowledge as a GM. I mean,
you have the tools, but you have to figure them out a little bit more.
Yes, you also had, in theory, 40 levels of time to
figure it out.
But I also think, and we are working now on the Bestiary, which will be the next book.
So excited!
Oh,
and
hot drop news.
No. I mean, you guys knew, yeah.
I
had done some diving because we've talked about it before. All of the art for the game is beautiful, and in the core book and all of the extra books, you see for big enemies, you see what they look like, right? You get these great, beautiful splash pages of what they look like.
Yeah.
But the smaller enemies, you're like, oh, I wonder what that thing's whole body looks like. And I had done some deep diving, and somebody was like, oh yeah, there's a bestiary coming out with more of the monster art, and I was like,
and we don't have them. Like those monsters only exist as portraits.
Okay.
Oh, so Josh was
because that was the bestiary for the core book.
So we're getting new
monsters. You guys have no idea.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Obviously, I could have made a standard bestiary, but no, I'm an idiot. So what the book is actually multiple things. One, it's a primer on the philosophy of GMing on the side of antagonists and enemies in a tactical sense.
Okay, yeah.
Second thing, quick assembly, which is also, by the way, the preview is on my Patreon, but it's on Patreon, but it's open to anybody. Okay. Quick assembly basically divides creatures in various roles, and you can drag and drop elements to sort of being served for the entirety of the campaign. So like
sick, into it.
And that's around 50 pages of content. And then
Jesus.
There's gonna be the compendium, which is, yes, a bunch of new enemies. And we never had anything like this. This is something that was not possible before, both in terms of economics and in terms of the number of people that we need. We're gonna do a crowdfunding for this. It's not possible to do without crowdfunding.
Makes sense.
And but the point is, that book is gonna talk very openly about some of this stuff, which in the core book, I no longer had this space to talk about.
Right.
And in Atlases, they're not really about that. They're not about generic advice.
Right.
We used the sample antagonists,
they're specific.
Sometimes to showcase some options.
To showcase what the game could potentially do.
Yeah, especially how unfair and aggressive you can be at higher levels.
Right.
But there's also, different kinds of unfairness. And all these little delicate levers, including what to do for your party when they are too weak, not too strong. Because the game really, I'm a lover of Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, Atlus kind of games. Those games don't exactly give you a good time if you don't want to put your brain into them.
Very true. Very true.
And
and
there is, it's a double-edged sword. People who love it, they love it. But for the average user, the game, Fabula Ultima, kinda is demanding. It's not saying it can work out without caring too much. Even the easy fights, if you don't engage, the bare minimum of the elemental affinities, the debuffs, protecting, diverting aggro, it's gonna be tough. And you can't come back from 0 HP. And, in a way, High Fantasy Atlas, the classes are a little overpowered because there was a strong reaction to this, and so I decided maybe I should make the game easier.
Interesting.
And some abilities were definitely, overtuned in order to provide more safety nets. Obviously, I was an idiot, but you learn with time. And because it turned out people who actually put in the work and learned, now those abilities in their hands were too much.
Too much, yeah.
And so we kind of had to find, a balance. And I'm really glad that, for instance, Natural Fantasy has been out since basically summer in Italy. Haven't touched it, no errata, no nothing. And this is only being possible because the community has provided feedback a ton, and I had so many eyes commenting, this looks too strong, I don't know how to use this, I don't know how I feel about this. Like psychologically, emotionally, this doesn't make me happy. And it's taxing on me very much, but the result is definitely a better game. But going back to the bestiary, the initial part is very outspoken about, who actually has the responsibility in things. And players are actually a lot more responsible than game masters for the quality of the tactical experience. Because the GM can only work with what the players give.
Yeah,
right, makes sense.
None of you have fire damage. I can't use fire damage. It's not irrelevant as a data, One of you has all the damage types and does the most damage. Every battle is going to go the same way. So the player and not the GM is the main, artifacts of slogs and boring fights. Because in this kind of game, due to how I made it, even I, as the designer, have very little power because the classes are not linear. I cannot force you to take synergistic options, or to not take them if you are doing too much, because there's also the opposite extreme of being too vertical, too good at one thing, and that's problematic because if you can do it, it's boring. But if you can't do it, you are useless. And, there's no middle ground. So I actually wrote pages in which I explain what we consider, a good spread for a party. Like, we want at least 4 different damage types, but we don't want one person to have all of them. It's better, it's more interesting if different people, like maybe everyone is a little bit of an attacker and a little bit of something else, and they switch around depending on the kind of foe they are facing. Because this is how a professional video game designer would build a party of characters. And obviously, I don't do it because the system is modular, but that means that kind of responsibility is put on the players, who are the ones who build the characters in the actual experience. And we do want to, we are considering the idea of writing a tactical guide in a way for like the future, talking future, maybe 2027 or something. Which would be, more like a book of exploring how the various options interact with each other and things that have, been discovered. Because don't get me wrong, I write the rules, but I also discover them. Like, the interactions that are found out by the community aren't always the ones that I had in mind. Or, there's sort of this process of discovery, which is also self-discovery. Like, one funny thing that I shared with the Patreons yesterday was I was in the process of writing a presentation of the Fabula Ultima project for a collaboration, and we specifically had to focus a lot on why Fabula and why Ultima, like the meaning of this duality. And as I wrote why we chose these specific words, I realized like an entire train of thought that was very much subconscious when I chose those words, but then now over time has taken on a specific meaning. So like, don't expect designers to always have the answer ready in the pocket, because we often, are experimenting.
You're right, and I think that something that a lot of devs say about when they put things into early access is the best R&D you do is from the community, right? If you only have the same 3 or 4 minds doing all of your stress testing, one person will think about things a certain way, one person will think about things a certain way, one person might have some overlap with those two and have his own ideas, but you're not going to get that quality of information unless you have a massive database to work with, right? So that's one of the good things, like designers can't. On some level, it's impossible for them to have all the answers. You kind of have to rely on your community to get those answers from them,
100%.
Yeah, I mean, a game doesn't really exist until it hits the community in a way, right? Like,
yeah, it's a
that's the final gear in the machine or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like the bolt on the Frankenstein monster. Like, it's inanimate before that.
Yeah, and and the thing, you've said so many interesting things, and there have all been a chance for me to bounce one of the questions I wrote down to you. I feel like I have to ask you just one, the me question, the one that I care about the most, which is, so, you talked about your favorite, you like marshals. My favorite class in all of Final Fantasy is Summoner. So obviously Arcanist, I saw that as the first class, and I immediately was like, I don't care what else this book has, I'm in. And you put a lot of time and a lot of care into making Arcanist arguably the most narratively complex class in the core rulebook. What was your thought process behind that? Like the importance of its baked-in narrative, the fact that you really shouldn't have more than one, you really can't commoditize the Arcanum. They're all supposed to have this like deep cultural significance. The fact that you can't even use them to make technospheres, right? Like that's just something that's not allowed in the game. What was your thought behind that? And on a small addendum, you chose the kind of summoner that's more akin to Final Fantasy IX, where they're trancing rather than full-on summoning or just having them do attacks like in the earlier games. Was there a significance behind that?
These are all good questions, and be clear, I expect the same kind of questions from Josh about their own preferred class.
Oh
no.
I don't know if I had a class-specific question.
But,
why is Chanter so cool?
All right.
Chanter was super sick.
One thing at a time. Summoner. Well, it could be said that you are not making a Squaresoft era-inspired Final Fantasy homage without a summoner.
Completely agree.
Right,
okay?
Yeah.
We can take away the Dark Knights, we can take away the monks, the black belts, we can take away, we can even take away the red mage. But we can't take away the summoner, because the summoner is always interwoven with the plot. Because the summons are just too big and, impactful and like they are awesome. They are awesome in the literal sense of filling you with awe. And these presences are also one of the things that fascinates me most about how, the afterlife, spirits, and things like that work in this kind of setting. So, essentially, I consider Arcanist to be the religious class of the game. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
There's several reasons for this. One is mechanically, this is represented by the rituals being only willpower. There is no, it's not like they don't study the legends or things like that, but it comes from a place of just sheer faith and determination, okay? Belief. And this belief is, in a way, cradled by these concepts made flesh. Obviously, we call them arcana because we didn't want to, choose a word that was specifically tied to one Final Fantasy.
Yeah, you didn't want to use eidolons or aeons or summons.
Icons, primals.
Because
but all those words actually tell you what they are, because eons, time, they represent time. They represent entire epochs,
Yeah.
This means that they are ancient. Primals. This means they are so ancient, they are actually basically the basic framework of creation. And eidolons, well, that's the same root as idea. And if you go Platonic, you can go to the concept of the world of ideas, which is basically above the sky, where the pure form of what we see exists. And so for Arcanist, my idea was very cosmic in the sense of you let your soul go up and it resonates with some of these leftover energies in the stream of souls, of reality, and you reawaken them and they envelop you with a different presence, okay? So trance, maybe, but exactly how it manifests is something that I want to leave firmly in the hands of the player, because I think that contrary to other classes, the aesthetics of summoning is actually the mechanics of summoning, in a way, in terms of, social reactions to it, the role they play, even where you go in order to acquire new ones, and there's also obviously some mechanical concerns. For instance, I did not want any summoning class. I did not want to wreck action economy. So
didn't want pets. I see. I was right.
No pets. No. Wayfarer has a pet, but that's not a pet. That's a faithful companion. That is someone that is going to be with you for the entirety of your damn life. And basically, it's part of the family. And this is also kind of correlated to the question, why no Tamer class? Well, because Tamers are not heroes. Sorry. Because there's nothing heroic about, Pokemon eugenics. No, I don't want any of that. I don't want you to capture the monster and then see that his affinity to fire is not good because we are heading into the volcano, and so you leave it hanging around and go take another thing. They are not things, they are alive. And if there is a pillar of Fabula Ultima that people say seems a little bit too forced, but those people really didn't understand a thing about the game, it's the soul stream. Every single thing has validity in terms of, being alive. This is above, concepts such as animal rights or veganism or things like that. This is literally everything that exists is precious and vulnerable and is an expression of a gigantic global form of living. And obviously this is, the live stream in Final Fantasy VII is the more classic example, but the pirate flies and stuff from Final Fantasy X goes pretty close as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much every Final Fantasy game has something close to the live stream thing, right? Like
one
14,
way or another.
Yeah, 14 has the ethereal sea. 15, I think 15, I think, also referred to it as an ethereal something or other. I just finished 16, and 16 had the idea of the aether is the lifeblood from the crystals. So, they all do it.
Yeah, and so this also kind of answers, I guess, a little bit the question about commodifying. What are you commodifying? If you are commodifying a living thing, well, that's blatantly bad enough. But commodifying an arcanum is interesting. You mentioned that Arcanist is not allowed. That is not exactly true. It's more that we don't recommend it for mechanics reason, but having as artifacts spheres, that are gifts from the arcana and that allow you to inject their power into you, that can work, because that's using a tool of depersonalization, commodification, and oppression, which is technospheres, because they are that, and kind of turning it on its head. It's also why it's important, and I wish I had more room to talk about this in books, but the initial nemosphere that you get in a technosphere game the story of that sphere is important. Like in our Techno Fantasy campaign that we ended recently, my character had a fury sphere, and like you could be, oh yeah, it's a fury that it's a sphere to have adrenaline abilities and boost your damage when in crisis. Yes, but it was also a gift from the community she came from, which was essentially enslaved by the corporation. So that sphere inside had generational rage. Okay? And that is what I mean when I say some classes, with the choices and the liberties that they give you or they don't give you, do want to send you a message. Like the fact that you cannot, beyond your first arcana, which by the way, your first 3 arcana, you get it only if you become an arcanist at creation.
Right.
Because this idea is that then there is, probably some backstory or training, and you begin as the summoner character.
Yeah, it's Yuna starting with Valfor specifically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But later on, no matter at which level you are, giving you automatic progression with Arcana would be bad for 2 reasons. One, they are deeply, deeply ingrained with the narrative, to the point that if you don't have an Arcanist character, you should not have Arcana in the world. Probably. Like, your story is not about that.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
You can have, I don't know, guardian spirits, but not arcane, probably. Like, use that name only when it's relative to a character, would be my advice. And the second thing is, we also wanted people to never get another Arcanum if they don't want it. Like, if they want to go, I have a stand, and this is just my persona, we wanted that to be possible as well. Now, Arcanist, admittedly, is probably the worst designed class I made in the core book. Because I focused too much on simplicity. I focused too much on this idea of they don't summon, like they don't actually create a new body on the field. And I went, I went Final Fantasy VI with them. They are just big spells, big auto hit spells, and the fusion, the merge, the passive benefit they give you when you are with them. I didn't really design them. I did not put enough effort. And this has been a big regret. For people who are familiar with my playtest documents, I have a variant Arcanist. Because don't get me wrong, for some people, they really love this take on Arcanist. They don't really want to care about the merge. They just want to, boom, detonate everything. And honestly, the problem is that I spoke at length about how I want people to, feel like they have to vary up their builds. But core book Arcanist really has one way to go, which is I pick another caster class, I go into Crisis, I pay nothing for my Arcana, and I chain spells after the Arcanum. Beam, boom, boom, Nova Blaster, one playstyle. Not good. Okay, not great, not excellent. So I've made a variant which has a little bit of different bits, and the Arcana are less powerful in terms of their dismiss, but they are a lot more active when they are here. Like, they give you an additional action that you can make, and usually that action does a build-up of points or something that you can then spend to make the dismiss more powerful. During Gen Con this year, we also released a free document with some new Arcana, which work with the classic Arcanist, but have a very involved merge effects in order to reward you for, sticking with the Arcanum. And the Bestiary similarly will feature 6 new Arcana that are even more complicated. Imagine that each of these, the effects take up 1 page, basically.
Oh my goodness.
They do take 1 page because there's also a space for the artwork. So
Right.
but you can treat them as like 4 times the text of a core book Arcana. And yes, the official ones have a simplicity to them, which is cool. But I do think that if there was a class in which I could be allowed to be more baroque in core book, that was the summoner. And especially when it came to expressing the personality of Arcana. That's another problem. I made the core book Arcana extremely vague. Like, they don't really have personality. This is the Arcanum of the Forge. What does it mean? Yeah, it has these domains, it has this generic effect. Because I was like, if I make them too, if I give them too much personality, people will not make their own Arcana because they think that the official ones are already good enough.
Right.
And I wanted to be like, this is a baseline, but we all agree that it's a little bit boring. Let's do something different. That is not how it went. Instead, people were like, so I am wrong if I'm trying to make it interesting. Like, if I go above this, I'm making it too strong.
Making it too much.
Yeah. And so, mistake very much admitted. I will not be able to, we are working on erratas and a little bit of tweaks to the books. Basically, whenever a cycle of printing goes, we make little tweaks to stuff. And by the way, for those who are listening, these are always updated with the PDF. So like, it's not you have to buy the book again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, if you want it in paper, okay.
Well,
but
yeah.
The PDF at least is always updated. I can't change those Arcana, but I am working hard on providing Arcana in other books, in other stuff, in other content that gives a little bit of an alternative. And finally, what I do want to say for Arcanist is that for me, the fact that it forces you to essentially create a story around the Arcana, how they are obtained, are there temples, are there people who worship them, even just how it is to interact with one. Like, does it appear to you in a dream and once you have done something that they deem worthy and gives you the power, or do you have to, go and talk to maybe a talking stone statue of the Arcanum who will judge you? I don't know this, and this is very freeform and it's very broad, but to me, basically, it's the kind of freedom that is fundamental in a game like this, because in JRPGs, really, there are very different takes on summons and what they mean. Like, if you think Final Fantasy 13, they're basically curses. So, you can range quite a bit. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, I mean,
he wanted a long-winded answer on that one.
Yeah, like I said, I've made summoner characters in D&D. In every RPG I've ever played, I've gone, how can I make a summoner out of this? Because it's my favorite thing. And a little backstory. So you said you had gotten into Final Fantasy X when you were in either like early elementary or middle school. My grandfather taught me to play Final Fantasy when I was like right out of Pampers, basically. Like my grandfather, when he was, when my dad, right about when I was born, he was like, okay, I want to quit smoking. Just because, it's expensive and he just didn't want to do it anymore. So he picked up playing video games on my dad's Game Boy Color, and he got hooked immediately. And then he was, asking him about how he could get more of them and where he could go to find them. And
where do I acquire the video game?
Yeah. Listen, cut to me at like 5 years old. I'm sitting in my living room at my father's house with my 2 older brothers next to me, and my grandfather's is ripping through enemies using Hellfire with Ifrit. And it was just the coolest thing that you could just make this thing come and fight with you. And it wasn't your pet, like you were saying, like it was a god that you were calling to your aid that was your homie that deemed you worthy of their help, and it was like this amazing, like deeply, it really changed my brain chemistry. I don't think if I can really put into words how important that thing was to me.
It's definitely, it's something unique to that kind of game. Like, in terms of imaginaries, you know.
Yeah. No, it's definitely unique.
Yeah.
The closest that I can think is really like a stand from JoJo or its many derivatives. But like in D&D, yes, you do have summonings. Like you can summon an angel,
you can summon stuff,
things like that. But it's different to me than like this guy has seen you and decided, yes, you can wield my Hellfire sword a few times a day.
Yeah, in D&D, summoning a Deva with the Summon Celestial spell is like a tool. It's like a weapon you're utilizing. Whereas in Final Fantasy, it's always treated as like there's a narrative, there's a whole story to it. I mean, even in Final Fantasy 16, where the icons are like power-up forms, right? The dominants turn into icons. There's still a ton of like religious and like story narrative, and who the dominant is a really important thing to each of the cultures, and like there's all that stuff behind it. It's not like they're just activating monster mode.
Yeah, and like to me, it's also it ties into a larger discourse about religions in Fabula Ultima, like in worship and the afterlife.
Right, how do they work
like
and
that.
stuff? Yeah,
and
no,
like,
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's I spent a little bit of space in high fantasy about folks. Yeah, there's no angels. This is all demons, but not in the sense of demon bad.
Right.
In the Greek sense.
In the Greek sense, yes, the Greek sense.
Yep.
That's exactly
what
I said.
Intermediaries between the not even the supernatural, but the supernal and the terrestrial. And like, they can be good or bad, or, you know, the core book is admittedly very sparse about this, but it tells you that they come from myth and legend, which means in Fabula Ultima, canonically, the deity is not before its worshipper. Like, it can only exist as long as a form of life, even an insect, is able to think up this concept.
Right, to worship it and know about it. And and like the primals in 14, they don't just exist.
Means, and it also means like that it can change.
Right, yep.
It can change in a way that I hated the D&D gods for not being able to do. Like, for me, when I researched about a D&D deity, or actually, honestly, most traditional fantasy deities, I always get this big list of the do's and don'ts and what their cults are like, and it is presented in such a way that it says the deity has their own opinions, and the people who worship it may, belong to different cults that have different opinions. Much like in real life, people who profess to, worship the same entity will have differences in how they view it. But to me, the beauty, I guess I played Okami, and that arranged my brain. Because it was, you know what? If people don't hope in you, you're not a deity. Sorry, it's not a birthright. It's not the cosmic matter.
You gotta earn it.
Yeah.
Or you gotta earn it back, or you gotta maintain it. And this, to me, creates a more dynamic cycle, and also leads to the kind of divine antagonist you see in Final Fantasy, where you have the guy who is, why are you doing this? I'm about this. If I stop doing this, I cease to exist, literally. Like, I don't need another motivation.
Yeah, that is literally Final Fantasy 16's villain. Straight up.
It's and to me it's something that manages to make the one-dimensional divine villain no longer one-dimensional, for the simple fact that you are adding the thing of, if this does not continue, my meaning ceases to be.
Well,
threatens my life.
Yeah, so something cool about that, right, is that's what me and Josh, when we were talking about the villain system, that's what we were talking about with Xenos, right? Like, on the face of it, he seems
I remember.
really simple. But that one thing, his one thing is as deep as an ocean. There's so much layered on his one thing that it's practically not one thing anymore.
Yeah.
And And it's also, how you can get to the villain that is human, and then suddenly there's like this cutscene, and now they have demonic powers. Well, it turns out it's all connected by the magical energy of souls and reality. So as long as they believe that they are in the right and have the backup of people who put all their faith in them, yes, this guy is basically a demigod, because it is such in the view of the people. And this again brings me to one of my favorite parts of Fabula Ultima, which is it can get really dark. Because if you take these things and actually, dissect them from a philosophical point of view, yes, it's hopeful, because now even a deity is not,
Invincible.
impossible to beat. Because what matters is that you destroy its grip on reality by restoring faith in different alternatives. And suddenly, they are stripped of part of their power. And similarly, the player characters... Okay, I have a good one for you. You know that player characters don't have a species in Fabula Ultima.
Yes.
Right.
It's for NPCs. If player characters had a species, what would it be?
Human, elf, dwarf, the standard stuff.
No. I mean beast, monster, elemental, undead, plant, humanoid, demon.
To humanoid, presumably.
It would be demons.
Oh.
They are tails. And what happens? The more we talk about them, the more we spend our points to change their tails, the stronger they become.
Oh.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
We are literally...
I wouldn't think about it that way, but
yeah, that's
Right?
fascinating.
And if you apply the same concept, well, of course now they can beat the big guy. Because they went through their entire story and talked to so many people, and now they are stronger because they were in contact with stories. With existence.
Right.
And that's why I say you can go very deep. But you can also go dark in this, because, it means that everybody has the potential to be a terrifying demon.
Right.
And like it's not being born from Zeus that makes you Athena. it's having a certain point of view, certain perspective, and going really hard in that direction. And there are many ways to go really hard in a direction, Some of them are more cruel than others. And so you go into the whole, the Griffith kind of character, or for people who are fan of From Software, the Marika situation in Elden Ring, or Mikola, what are you willing to do in order to achieve the kind of world that you think should be ideal? Turns out, as long as you cut corners, you're going to make this world miserable. But if you don't cut corners, maybe you will never reach your ideal world. So that's the kind of intense stuff. And then you can also go beyond that, because when you go the other direction and talk about how lived experience is tied to the stream of souls, mental manipulation and propaganda and misinformation and things like that are like literally in this world. You can use magic to do that, to change public opinion, like a device that connects to the stream of souls. And then you go, into Digimon Cyber Sleuth kind of stories for that, which are, allegories for other things. And you can also go. I had a very intense demo once in which basically one of the characters came from a people that were being invaded by the evil military empire of the day. And the point is that they were destroying their crops and like the plants and stuff, because this ancient vegetation was attached to the stream of souls, where they buried the consciences of their ancestors. So by destroying them, literally they were removing the memory of those ancestors from the people of today. And obviously, this is the kind of stuff that, especially in a demo, we went through safety tools about this topic because the topic is extreme.
Can get heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy. No, yeah. Like this is a game about JRPGs, and when I bring demos of Fabula Ultima, I always put in warnings for, imperialism, genocide, and all that stuff, because JRPGs usually are about this. They don't really, they're not shy about showing you a lot of horrors.
No, generally no.
Yeah, but, going back to the pillars, imagine removing these pillars, what it does to the potentials, of the stories.
Right.
It's certainly reassuring if the gods are gods and if some things cannot change. But the intent is instead that really everything can change. Like you can achieve the kind of dreadful cosmic horror ending where the entire universe basically wraps around and churns together, and like the heroes are now the only thing that makes the possibility of a future a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a response to add on that. Like, yeah, you hit the notes.
Yeah, seriously.
I get this. This will have to be the last question because I'm not trying to keep you here till the end of time. But I have to know, because you specifically said something about it. So when you commented on our YouTube, which is in case anyone's curious how this all started, you mentioned that the social conflict part of the game is something sort of easily misunderstood with the system. And me and Isaiah, I distinctly remember having an argument about like how it's supposed to work, and we didn't really come to any kind of conclusion because I kind of looked at it one way, he looked at it another way, Isaiah drew some inferences, so on and so forth.
It might be interesting to know that in the first, well, not really the first, but before Neat Games and I went, through the core book, right, and decided to change things, there was 18 pages of a sample conflict, and it was a social conflict. Now, those pages were replaced with the various examples of clocks and objectives, and I think those are more useful. So more
valuable. Yeah,
like in general, I agree with that. But I did save that document, and I have it pinned in my Discord. So the intent is essentially, yes, objective action is the most important thing. We know it. It's how you advance that kind of situation. Okay. Yes, some classes will shine more than others. Like orators, they are basically the social conflict DPS. However, there's a couple of things to consider. One, you shouldn't really have, like, these shouldn't be scenes that are played out. I'm talking social, to convince someone that is your opponent in the conflict. These should be scenes in which two sides try to convince a third side that is outside the conflict, okay? Like us trying to prevent the queen from declaring war, meanwhile her very suspicious advisor is doing the opposite. Okay?
I see.
Because you can't just have the push and pull between the two sides.
So it doesn't work super well as like a PvP thing per se.
You shouldn't, absolutely no.
Yeah.
No,
so it's more about,
we have a section for PvP, and it sort of comes down to, do you guys really want to do it? Really?
Yeah.
Are you sure you don't want to just agree
to disagree?
No. It's more like if something interrupts you, and then we like resolve this in a moment where it's not just bickering, but it's life or death. Right. When it's more cool, I guess.
I mean, I'm always someone who says, at the table, I think PvP, in you have to put massive quotations at PvP. PvP is fine when it's fists, right? Like, you see this all the time in a Final Fantasy where characters will get into, like, friends will get into a fist fight, because that's what friends do.
Oh yeah, they argue all the time.
And especially when it comes down to something like stopping genocide or overthrowing government, you're going to disagree. And if characters come to blows about it, it should always be a narrative thing where they're punching each other in the face not drawing swords or anything like that.
Yeah, not
It's not
literally
how
trying
your
to stab
friends
each other.
act. Although, I mean, unless you're if you're Sephiroth and Genesis, maybe they got something else going on.
You
But
have caused me to go on a tangent. We did have a PvP situation that was played out as a full combat conflict in our Techno Fantasy campaign, when the mutant, who was basically the biggest tank DPS in our group of 3 people, was mind controlled because she was recaptured by the company. And they unleashed her against us, and it was 2 rounds, and basically me and the other player had to plan our moves entirely in order to be able to beat her. Because if she was able to reach a 3rd turn, we would be gone.
Yeah, done.
And the interesting thing here is that you know who decided to play this out as a combat, and like who decided that she would be mind controlled? Us. The GM absolutely didn't
want to do it.
No. The GM was like, I don't know, folks. Here we see her being escorted inside the facility. You guys are like a mile back. She's strong. Like if you guys want to tell me that she manages to break free, or like what makes for a better story in the sense of the kind of story that we are playing out, which is very Final Fantasy VII Xenogears kind of grim. Well, there is one answer, and the answer is boss fight against your temporary non-party member. and we accepted that. We didn't think we would win. We thought we were probably going to surrender and all be captured by the company. But you know what? She has a counterattack build, and we only rolled odds. So the dice decided. I had Fabula points ready to turn my evens into odds by invoking bonds in order to not trigger her counterattacks, which would have destroyed me. But I didn't need to, because the dice, who have aesthetic sense, decided that we deserve to win this one. And that is a situation, when we are all agreeing that no matter how it goes, this is going to be cool and badass and dramatic. There I can see, using the swords.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, otherwise, but you have to make it basically an episode of the show.
Right.
you know? It can't be, no, I disagree. I should have the 5 sword. No, I should have the 5 sword. No, that is not what you
That's
want.
just a back and forth.
yeah,
exactly. But going back to the social conflict, objective action is definitely the big deal. But there's quite a few things. For instance, remember that no matter how many actions you have, you can always interpose an objective action. So a single enemy, even with 1 turn, who has a very high willpower and insight, is a veritable wall for a group of characters that are trying to advance their objectives. Not to mention, we can have unique enemy abilities for conflicts. The quick assembly method in the bestiary is actually gonna showcase a few. I'm gonna give you my favorite one, which is spend 1 Ultima point to take the filled sections of one clock and the filled sections of another clock and swap them.
Oh, nice. That's a fun one.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And our clock is 8 out of 10. His clock is 4 out of 8. Now his clock is complete and we are good. And obviously this costs 1 Ultima point because it's just a little bit of a dirty move,
Yeah.
And but the idea is some enemies might also, when they hinder you, they might hinder 2 people at once. On enemies, you can do a lot, okay? Because enemies are really freeform. So it is a little bit cheap to talk about them because they are just very, very vague. The GM can always kind of make an enemy profile specifically to be cool in this kind of instance. What can players do? Well, again, the hinder action is very much undervalued because difficulty 10 to inflict a status effect is not bad at all. especially in social conflicts. Social conflicts usually involve a lot of opposed checks, and
Makes sense.
debuffing is incredibly relevant in terms of your odds. Guarding is relevant because guarding gives you +2 on all opposed checks until your next turn.
Right?
So
yeah, that makes sense.
Again, remember, you can interpose freely as long as you have something to say to counter, to a counterpoint of some kind. You can do it, and +2 is incredible in a game with 2 dice. Where you have a curved distribution. Then we go into other stuff. Should you be able to use spells? Well, spells are always visible, so it might look like you're cheating. Can you use chants from a chanter? Well, you know what? Those are also very magical, but I don't think people would have a problem. Can you plant a little plant as a floralist and just tend to your bonsai as it restores the NP of your orator? Maybe yes. I mean, I'm not against that stuff. It may depend on the context. Like if you are at a rigid court with very firm etiquette is one thing. Not. But maybe instead we are playing out a conflict that is several days of a trial. And so the actions are basically self-isolated scenes and stuff like that. They don't have a rigid time limit conflict. So you can, expand or compress as you wish. And then we have abilities that maybe don't read like they could be useful, but they are. So for instance, Fury, provoke. Enraged on someone who is about to talk, that is not a good place to be. And they also have to focus their attention on you. Yes, they have to include you with attacks and spells, but they also have rules to focus their attention on you, which means they will probably make some faux pas and go after you when instead they might have something better to do in the conversation. Fury also has Indomitable Spirit, which is quite good because when they spend Fabula point, they can cleanse from status effects, and during social situations, this is pretty useful. Wayfarer, maybe not during the situation, but resting and being able to, use tavern talk to just ask, what really gets this nobleman pissed, and having an answer is a good way to handle it. Rogue is actually disgusting in social conflicts because high speed allows them to make an objective action preemptively before the conflict has even begun. So and it gets a bonus equal to your skill level in high speed. So you could really make an opening, defamation, I guess.
Right.
And just maybe fill 2 or 3 sections of a clock. There are classes that struggled more, definitely. I would say Weapon Master and Sharpshooter are
not good talkers.
Remember, you have other 2 classes slots.
Right, of course. Yeah.
But you know what? I have to tell you, during chases, those 2 are incredible because Bone Crusher and Warning Shot just distribute status effects constantly. And yes, it's an attack, but an attack in Fabula Ultima can also be throwing your dagger at the feet of the guy and just be, don't move, so that you slow them,
You hit him with the Arnold Schwarzenegger stick around.
Yeah, I mean, and also Bone Crusher and stuff like that, they don't do damage if you choose to go that way. So it's even, in line with the mechanic. In a social context, I tell you, I would not be angry if an enemy has the ability to spend mind points to improve their odds on clocks. I would not be mad at a weapon master just going there, grabbing them by the neck and just throwing them on the ground and that's a Bone Crusher to drain NP. I would not be. Obviously, it's still fiction. So maybe if this goes badly, you could be just thrown out of the room. the GM, this stuff has consequences that go just beyond merely using the action.
So the GM can really adjudicate if they feel like it makes sense for a social conflict kind of thing. If the player can...
Yes, my favorite take is not to say you cannot do it, but it's more to say, okay, but I'm gonna fill one section of this clock here.
Right, okay? Yeah.
Like, it's a trade.
It's a very Blades in the Dark style of doing it.
Yeah.
I prefer it that way. And it kind of comes down to what I was saying about the game not being tight, because you have many systems that can resolve the same event in the fiction, but depending on which system you use, you are giving that event a completely different meaning. Like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo that grab a couple stormtroopers, pim pum pam, they are down on the ground and now they have the armor. That's not a battle conflict. That is a group check.
Right, yeah, of course.
But now, it was a physical confrontation, no? And now, I would be insincere if I didn't say 90% of the damn conflict scenes in this game are gonna be fights.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense.
It's JRPGs, okay?
Yeah.
And we do want that stuff. But I urge you to, look at the classes and think what skills could, bend in order to go and be a different thing. And obviously, for game masters, I invite you to give enemies abilities that are connected to non-combat, non-exclusively combat conflicts. Like the saboteur role in the bestiary, for instance, has the ability to select one of their spells or actions and make it so that no one other than the target realizes this was, an offensive spell or something. So they can just flare you from the other side of the room, and for people around you, you just had,
just confused.
Stroke.
Yeah.
And that's mean, but sometimes it can be fun.
Yeah. So a little, then a small little addendum question to the social conflict thing, because me and Isaiah were debating this. So are mind points, like if you run out of...
Irrelevant.
Not relevant to the social conflict, not intended to be relevant. Okay.
It's clocks.
Okay, that's what we were trying to figure out, because Isaiah was like, well, maybe the intention is that if you run out of mind points... Yeah, that's like your social conflict health is the mind points. But yeah, okay, so you're saying no, just use the clocks as the solution.
Fair enough.
Okay. Orator, it's a problem without mind points. So
right, yeah, that I get.
But the problem is, again, if mind points were your
health,
social HP, there would be so many moves that just one-shot you. Because there are many effects in the game that just, 40 MP, pam.
Right, and you're out.
And you're out.
Okay, that's good, because that was the one we had quite a bit of a back and forth.
Yeah, I remember it now. Yeah.
We continued the back and forth off recording a little bit too.
No, it went on for a while. We talked about it.
Kind of, if I make a horror version, there's a meme in the Italian community called Fabula Obscura. Nice. Which is basically, what if Emma decides to do, Kudelka or Parasite Eve and shit like that. And I can assure you, MP will be stressed in that case, yes.
Okay.
But there it's because I want you to feel like, oh my god, if I use my spell, I am getting closer to this horrible mutation or cosmic horror.
Right.
And I risk, just going down because I can't maintain the concentration.
Sorry, I just mean to say, I really appreciate you bringing up Kudelka. I just went down a deep dive rabbit hole on Kudelka and all of the sequels to that game.
Yes!
What a weird one.
Oh, you should.
Yeah,
Shadow Hearts, Josh? I can send you some several hour-long video essays.
Yeah, that's one of those ones I've heard of in passing.
Okay, so Fabula Ultima for Kudelka, completely inappropriate. But for Shadow Hearts, oh my god, yes.
Yeah,
it's a bit darker, but Shadow Hearts is mostly slapstick and traveling around the world with a cast of complete weirdos. And really, Fabula Ultima is, I think, perfect.
Well, right, because Yuri is literally an Arcanist Fury with a little bit of Weapon Master.
Yuri is like, we kid you not, the variant Arcanist that we are working on. People refer to it as the Harmonixer Arcanist because basically what it does is that while you are merged, you can use the skill action to perform a pulse, which is basically a special action.
You can't
and this
see
is also a way to, technically you do have the summoned creature because you just have to use your action in order to give it an order beyond just the passive benefit. And for people who wanted a more active, like they don't want to summon, then do other stuff and then dismiss, but they want to be an Arcanist, 24/7. They want that to be their character. Latest Arcanist, variant Arcanist is definitely where you find your stride there.
I'm so excited. I want to look at that so bad. I said Webmaster. I meant to say Chimerist, because this whole thing is he like sucks in your abilities and whatnot. Oh, that's so cool. All right, my hype is reinvigorated.
Nice.
So we'll free you now from the imprisonment, I think.
All right.
Also, because if we go any longer, our editor might actually kill us.
Makes sense. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, editor, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett, for
Thanks,
your
Brett.
suffering. Yeah. So I guess we have to do the obligatory. I forgot to say subscribe at the beginning, but if you liked all this chat, subscribe. Where, if people want to find you, Emma, where are they looking for you? Where do you want them to look for you?
Well, there's my Discord, which is the Rooster Games Discord.
Okay.
And that's the community, not just about Fabula Ultima, but about all my projects and stuff. There's also places for people to look for games, promote their own games and things like that. I try to keep it, a space for people to share the love. And patreon.com/roosteremma is where you can find, it's basically acting as my website. Regardless of if you're a patron or not, if you support me or not, if you log into Patreon or not, all the Fabula Ultima playtest materials are pinned in the first post and they are available to everybody.
Okay.
And so that's it. And
those are the two main ones?
Sorry?
I said those are the two main ones, yeah.
I have Instagram, I have Blue Sky, I have Twitter.
Right.
For now.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, like in general, those are more private profiles
Right.
where I post random stuff. And I guess stay tuned for the crowdfunding campaign later this year.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Do that,
right?
Stay tuned for that. Keep an eye out. And for us, if you can follow us on Twitter if you want to, but the subscribe on YouTube and or whatever podcast platform is more important, to be honest.
Yes, we have a Blue Sky now, by the way, thanks to me.
Oh, yeah.
5 minutes before we started recording. So you can follow us there if you were so inclined.
Find the Blue Sky.
Jump ship from the hell site.
Yeah. Alrighty. Goodbye forever, Internet.
Except we'll see you next week.
Except next week.
Eh.